911, what is your emergency?
Harry Potter is stupid, and it's about time someone said it was bad, because we're supposed to believe the wizards in the wizarding world is so much superior to the muggles, right? We've got McDonald's, they eat sweets that make you do elephant noises. Or I could eat bonbons that taste of literal sick and mucus. And we're supposed to think that this is charming and quaint. Well, it's not.
Sir, this line is reserved for emergencies only.
Nah, I don't care. Hagar the Horrible bicycled into my house and went, "Oh, you're a wizard, Stephanie." Bollocks, right?
Sir, I can't...
I don't care. I made my peace with Hogwarts. Bang! I'm a trendsetter.
Sir.
Merry Taffmas.
Hello guys, and welcome to a new video. Today we're going to be taking a look at another one of Jim Sterling's videos. This time it's the one on his Hogwarts: A Legacy of Hate video. A video that I've wanted to cover for a long time, but as it delves pretty heavily into politics, I didn't want to do it because, as you either learn from others or by watching your subscriber count drop, talking about politics is a great way to easily cost yourself quite a bit of your audience, but it seems like most of my audience now likes it when I talk about Jim Sterling, so why not do this one as well, because it is god-awful, and that's putting it nicely. Now, to be fair, this video, the one that we're going to be talking about, is over a year old at this point, so apologies, but as I said, I've wanted to talk about it for a long time now. Having said that, we're going to skip the intro skit of Jim's video because, one, it's really stupid, and it just doesn't add anything to the video as a whole, and the best response to it could be summed up with the phrase of, "It's fantasy, it isn't supposed to be realistic." Having said that, there are two parts of that intro skit that I want to keep in for context later, as well as to prove Jim Sterling's hypocrisy. The first is that Jim is seen drinking from a can of Monster Energy drink, and I know that it may seem insignificant, but just keep it in the back of your minds for right now. The second thing I want all of you to remember for later is this clip.
I didn't even want to do this episode. I've known it's coming for a year, but I don't want to have to talk about fucking Hogwarts.
Yeah, remember this clip for later as well. Anyways, I want to get this video out of the way now, so let's let Jim begin his utter silliness.
J.K. Rowling is a transphobe. This is a fact.
Okay, so a lot of you are probably gonna hate me for just coming out and saying it like this, or rather asking it to Jim. But answer me, Jim, and answer honestly if you're watching this. What exactly are you going to do about it? What is making this video supposed to accomplish? And yeah, before anyone comments, we'll see why Jim made it towards the end of the video, but again, keep it in the back of your mind for now.
It's a fact I've never seen disputed in good faith, only challenged by fellow transphobes who have a pre-baked line since these people read from the same script. What did she say exactly that's transphobic?
And considering how the words transphobe and transphobia and transphobic are now being thrown out nowadays like they're candy, I think that is a very fair question to ask, Jim. To me, it's no different from how certain people are out there throwing out words like misogyny, racist, incel, and all these other buzzwords nowadays. Those words used to mean certain things, and now they could mean anything because they've been used so much, so often to describe things that those words aren't even remotely applicable to, and they have lost any and all sense of meaning and power because of it. Let me ask you another question, Jim. When you were growing up, did you ever hear the story of the boy who cried wolf? There is a reason that we learn that story as children, Jim, and you and all these other wannabe victims like you are the reasons we learn that story as children.
Rowling couches her hatred in plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability? Really, Jim? Is that the route you're going to take with this video? This is basically Jim Sterling admitting that he doesn't have any evidence to back up his claims here. He's only going to give reasons as to why he thinks that J.K. Rowling is a transphobe. You know a video is gonna be bad when you basically start off with, well, I don't actually have any evidence to support that.
But her daily obsessive takes on us, her constant comparisons of trans women to men, her verbatim repetition of gender-critical talking points makes her feelings clear.
Since I have the ability to read, something Jim Sterling lost quite a while ago, let's read the first tweet that J.K. Rowling threw up, which reads, quote, "Many health professionals are concerned that young people struggling with their mental health are being shunted towards hormones and surgery when this may not be in their best interests. Sorry, but I fail to understand what about that is transphobic exactly. Hormone replacement therapy can really screw up your body, especially if you're going through puberty or haven't hit puberty yet. But that again raises the question of how is this transphobic exactly?" The other tweet J.K. Rowling threw up reads as follows, quote, "And, as I've said, gender confirmation certificates may now be granted without any need for surgery or hormones. Then you open the door to any and all men who wish to come inside. That is the simple truth. This isn't transphobic, Jim, because she actually raises a point here. Nowadays, all a man has to do to get into a woman's space is simply put on a wig and a dress, claim that he's a woman without having any sort of sex change operation or other form of proof. And I'm not going to say all men or transgender men do that, but there have been several cases of men doing that sort of thing and harming women in those safe spaces. Now, I'm not exactly the biggest fan of feminism myself, Jim, but even I can see where a feminist like J.K. Rowling is coming from on this one. Women like her have fought for centuries for women to be recognized as women, and when a man can simply put on a wig and a dress and say that he's a woman and march on into a female-exclusive space bold as brass, that would undo a lot of work that women like J.K. Rowling have done over the past 100 years or so.
She follows, is best friends with, and outright claims to be one of the many prominent TERFs, trans-exclusive radical feminists these days rebranded to gender criticals. Her slide into open fascism as a result has been horrifying.
So now we're labeling feminists as open fascists now? Do you even know what that word means, Jim? All J.K. Rowling did was take a picture with lesbians, other feminists, and a black woman. Total fascism, I'm just so convinced. Way to go, Jim!
She is a fan of Matt Walsh, a fascist so into fascism that he self-describes as one, and has made a career from accusing LGBTQ+ people of the very he himself seems to be a fan of.
What we have here is a very serious case of guilty by association, or at least an accusation of guilty by association. Jim, just because someone follows a Twitter account, or an X account as it's known by nowadays, doesn't mean you agree with everything that person has to say or whatever it is that they do. This is the exact same bull butter that Quantum TV did to Review Tech USA a year before the whole Hogwarts Legacy drama saga kicked off. Too bad for me that I don't have a name for it just yet, huh? Anyways, all this is just proof that we are living through some very strange times when someone can look at your X account, at who you follow, and then claim that because you follow an account that self-identifies as an open fascist, that means that you yourself are an open fascist, apparently. That isn't how this works, Jim. J.K. Rowling and Matt Walsh have argued with each other before, and I'm pretty sure that Matt Walsh doesn't agree with J.K. Rowling's feminist views. At least not all of them. Heck, I don't know of any of my family members or my closest friends that I agree on with everything.
She's liked tweets from the abjectly abhorrent Libs of TikTok account, a notorious right-wing platform that outs queer people and is used to organise attacks against drag shows as well as threats against hospitals.
Dude, I looked up stuff on Libs of TikTok, and first of all, I couldn't find a thing about what you claim that they do, Jim, and on top of that, you thought you scored a jackpot here, but really? You just came up empty. Just because you follow an X account, or Twitter account as it used to be known, doesn't mean anything, Jim.
She retweets unscientific drivel by queerphobes like Baroness Nicholson.
It's once again reading time with Jestan Diams. So, let's take a look at what Baroness Nicholson posted here. It reads as follows. J.K. Rowling has retweeted a letter which claims that humans have existed for 500 million years. The letter by the anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-abortion Baroness Nicholson is attacking a library for canceling a talk by infamous transphobe Julie Bindel during Pride. So, a question. How exactly does a talk, or a letter rather, that shows that humans have existed for 500 million years, how exactly is that transphobic, Jim? You say a lot without actually saying anything at all. All this is just a sad attempt at padding out Jim's video that he's become so fond of doing lately, and it's also one of the reasons that Jim started to bleed subscribers by the thousands a week, at least for a few years. And another question I want to ask Jim is, what does this have to do with J.K. Rowling? Is she the one saying this? No, she didn't. Keep that in mind for later in the video, folks.
She stands with Maya Forstater, who, after losing her job at a progressive organisation over demeaning anti-trans comments, has dedicated her life to combating trans rights.
And once again, Jim is being lazy and not doing an ounce of research when he made this video, so it falls to me to tell you about what really happened. Maya Forstater was fired from her job for being critical of gender identity. That isn't something that should be happening in the current day and age. Since J.K. Rowling is a feminist, and so is Maya Forstater from the looks of things, of course J.K. Rowling is gonna stand with her. Shoot, I'll go ahead and say that I stand with her. She was wrongfully fired from her job for literally no other reason than holding a belief. And the way you say it so casually, as if this is something that's okay to do. No, it's not. No one should ever be fired for holding a belief ever, or being critical of something. Maya won 3 of the claims in the employment tribunal, as she was wrongfully discriminated against for her beliefs, and after she was fired the first time it happened, I can't say I blame her, and neither would anyone else who got fired for simply being critical of something like gender identity. The only thing you've done here, Jim, is make J.K. Rowling look like a good person, oddly enough. And the way Jim seems to think that it's okay for someone to get fired for holding on to a belief and not going along with the herd is quite disturbing, to be honest.
She once sent accidental transphobic profanity to a 9-year-old girl after pasting a comment from an anti-trans website she was reading and copying at the time. She called criticism of this censorship and authoritarianism, seeming to defend her right to rope kids into her obsession.
Okay, first of all, Jim, J.K. Rowling didn't tweet to a 9-year-old on Twitter because 9-year-olds aren't supposed to be on Twitter. She tweeted to the parents of the 9-year-old on Twitter, and you yourself admit that it was an accident, as in, not deliberately done. In fact, it being an accident is the only thing Jim got right here.
And she is obsessive. Scroll through her Twitter and you'll find that she thinks about trans people all day, every day.
You claim that J.K. Rowling is the obsessive one who can't stop talking about trans people or thinking about them or whatever, yet your group, and by that I mean the Hogwarts Legacy boycotters, are the ones who are constantly running her tweets through a microscope, twisting everything that she says and does as if it goes against your existence, which she does hold some anti-trans beliefs, but the furthest it has ever gone has ended in mere disagreement. Let's be real, people like Jim only want people to validate that what they believe is true. Well, sorry to be the one to burst your bubble, Jim, but we ain't giving it to you. At some point, you're going to have to realize that you live in a world surrounded by people who are vocal about things like gender identity, and some of them are very vocal about it, like J.K. Rowling and Maya Forstater, but in J.K. Rowling's case, she does support the majority of the trans movement. Granted, not every single aspect of it, but is that really the worst thing in the world? I don't think it is. Oh, and before we move on, let's do a quick recap here. So far, what Jim has talked about has been more about the people J.K. Rowling follows, who she retweets, or whatever. And so far, Jim has said more about Matt Walsh, Libs of TikTok, and Maya Forstater. When are we actually going to talk about the video game or things that have actually come out of J.K. Rowling's mouth, Jim?
She herself has fought against Scotland's gender recognition reforms, scaremongering and spreading outright lies about a law that would simply make being trans a tiny bit easier. She still has the nerve to act offended at accusations of phobia, while literally campaigning against our basic rights and legal dignity.
Jim, that reform for trans people in Scotland would lower the age of limit for a gender recognition certificate from 18 to 16. Or how they want to make it so that you don't require a medical diagnosis for gender dysphoria. All J.K. Rowling was doing here was looking at the possible negatives that this reform would bring about, and there's nothing wrong with that.
At first, she tried to keep up the mask of someone who supports trans people but just has concerns and wanted to protect women's spaces, a long-time gender-critical dog whistle. She claimed her liking of transphobic tweets was just her fingers slipping, honest, and now she's an ardent supporter of Helen Joyce.
While we're trying to get through to the decision makers, we have to try to limit the harm. And that means reducing or keeping down the number of people who transition. Every one of those people is basically, a huge problem to a sane world. Like, if you've got people that, and whether they're transitioned, whether they're happily transitioned, whether they're unhappily transitioned, whether they're detransitioned, if you've got people who've dissociated from their sex in some way, every one of those people is someone who needs special accommodation. Every one of them is a difficulty.
Oh dear.
Good lord, man. She has some real guts of steel to be saying things like that in the modern day and age. However, what Helen said was taken out of context and stitched together. Now, do I agree with Helen on limiting the number of people who can transition? Absolutely not. Well, unless we're talking about minors, of course. However, she gave a logical reason, and a non-hateful one at that, as to why. But she's telling the truth. Lately, society has been going way out of its way to accommodate every single gender identity that's been discovered, air quotes, in the last, couple of years now? All of these gender identities have become difficult to manage. Also, again, notice how Jim has said far more about other people than J.K. Rowling herself. Jim, this is just getting pathetic at this stage.
That's someone J.K. Rowling agrees with, platforms, is a friend of. Indeed, the people Rowling champions are f***ing monsters.
For God's sakes, Jim. They are feminists. That is what they do. They are fighting for actual women's rights, biological women's rights. What is so wrong about that? Again, I'm not a fan of feminism, but in regards to everything you have shown off in this video, I actually side with the feminists, for once. There is nothing wrong with women wanting to be recognized as women or fighting for women's rights. How dare they, right, Jim? How dare a group of women want to be treated as women? How dare these women hold beliefs that disagree or go against yours? How dare they?
Here's GC figurehead Posey Parker telling cis men to patrol women's bathrooms on the hunt for trans women.
Talking about you dads who maybe carry, I think that's what you say. I'm so down with the American lingo. Maybe you carry, maybe you don't. Maybe you consider yourself a protector of women. Maybe you're that sort of man. Maybe you have a daughter or a mother or a wife. Maybe you have a sister. Maybe you just have some friends. Maybe you just think women are human and you don't need any absolute connection with them to feel compelled to protect us. I think you should start using women's toilets, men.
So much for keeping women's spaces for women.
Yeah, you see, Jim, that's this new invention. It was invented not too long ago. It's called sarcasm. I know you haven't heard of it until I made this video, because with all that research you did that showed J.K. Rowling being a bad person, yeah, I figured you would have heard of it by now, but what can I say? I was wrong yet again. Oh, and for those of you who couldn't tell, I was being sarcastic. Everything that was said in this little clip here was sarcasm. I know I shouldn't have to point that out, but considering that if I didn't, someone was going to take it out of context almost certainly. It probably would have been Jim.
Of course, Rowling has tried to be smart. She doesn't record herself outright repeating the violent sentiment. No, she contents herself with laughing at us.
That's how I saw him.
I will never tell this to anyone, so hopefully not with a transgender person.
This has been such a pleasure.
Her slimy, cowardly behaviour goes back years. What's shown in this video so far is just from stuff I started collecting in the past year because I knew this subject was inevitable.
What's shown in this video so far is just from stuff I started collecting in the past year because I knew this subject was inevitable.
Hey, you guys all remember that clip towards the start of the video that I said you should keep an eye on or keep in the back burner of your mind? The one where Jim said he didn't even want to do this video. Let's watch it again and... to really take it in.
I didn't even want to do this episode. I've known it's coming for a year, but I don't want to have to talk about Hogwarts.
So much for not wanting to do this episode, eh, Jim? In fact, I'll do you one even better and tell you that you sure sound dedicated to covering this for someone who didn't even want to do this episode. Also, I call some massive bull butter on you claiming that you had started collecting evidence for this video over the past year. No, Jim, what you did was wait until the very last minute to get all the so-called evidence, air quotes, and then you hit record and spoke directly from your heart of hearts. That's all. Dude, are we going to be talking about Hogwarts Legacy and how you're a terrible person for buying it already, Jim? We're already over 22 minutes into this video, and you still haven't talked about the bloody video game. Padding your videos out, as I said before, is one of the reasons why you lost so many subscribers. Say your piece or be quiet.
While she's been careful enough not to use plainly direct hate speech, I don't think her deniability is close to plausible anymore. Look at the lies she tells, the fascists she supports. Look at how much she talks about us. This is not what someone who doesn't loathe us does. This is the activity of someone with a genuine, deep-seated problem.
J.K. Rowling is the obsessive one? She's the one that has a genuine and deep-seated problem. No, Jim, what you're doing right here is known as projection. You spent the past year profiling J.K. Rowling, or so you claim, so you assume that she must be profiling the transgender community. That is projection if I've ever seen it, folks. And believe you me when I say that I see it all the bloody time nowadays.
You don't have to believe me.
Oh, don't you worry, Jimmy. I absolutely don't believe you because not believing you is the easiest thing in the world to do nowadays. especially if this video is anything to go by.
You can believe the Harry Potter cast members who've condemned her.
What about the Harry Potter cast members who have good things to say about her, Jim? Are you just going to pretend like they don't exist at all and haven't sided with her? Oh, what am I saying? Of course you're going to pretend like they don't exist.
You can believe the historians who've catalogued a clear timeline of her descent into frothing bigotry.
Jim? Politico isn't historians. That's a German-owned newspaper company who, due to their political bias, can never accurately report on anything.
Or, if you'd rather, believe the Republican politicians who are actually citing her words in their anti-LGBTQ+ legislative efforts.
I hate to be the one to break it to you, Jim, but J.K. Rowling doesn't have the power to stop people from quoting her, and this is what the politicians said. To say in the words of J.K. Rowling this past week where she wrote, "All I'm asking, all I want is for similar empathy, similar understanding to be extended to the many millions of women whose sole crime is wanting their concerns to be heard without receiving threats or abuse. Let's work together to get equality. This bill does not do it in this form." What exactly is the problem there? It's a genuine concern, but the perfect thing to cite when quoting J.K. Rowling. So many people have been fired from their job for misgendering people, and this take is actually pretty tame and kinda based if you ask me. If the words J.K. Rowling were saying were harmful, and they quoted that, then that'd be one thing, but they're really not in the grand scheme of things. Also, notice how the quote doesn't mention a thing about transgender people. Oh, but what if the senators twisted J.K. Rowling's words around, Jestan? In that case, the blame should fall on the senators' heads, not J.K. Rowling's.
Believe the virulently right-wing male supremacy group Honey Badgers who call JKR their queen.
The Honey Badgers? Jim, I actually follow the Honey Badgers, and I know for a fact that they aren't a male supremacy group. They're a group of women fighting for men's rights and raising awareness of men's issues. In what freaking world exactly is that male supremacy? Also, in that screenshot is a Twitter account from a feminist who is, to put this lightly, blatantly opposed to men's rights. And then people who post crap like that wonder why the feminist movement as a whole gets so much hate. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some feminists out there who do address men's issues and try to fight for men's rights. Those ones I'm leaving alone, but now we're getting off topic. Let's get back to Jim's cringy rant, shall we?
Believe the photos of her at GC meetings.
Let's see. She took a photo with other feminists, lesbians, and a black woman. What's the problem with that exactly?
Believe the trans-exclusionary women's shelter she set up to replace the trans-inclusive women's shelter that her movement bullied and harassed out of operation.
Jim, J.K. Rowling didn't bully and force a trans-inclusive women's shelter to close. The article just said that it's for biological women only, and after what those women who have been in abusive relationships, you really think they want to be around what they still consider to be men? Nah, and from what I've heard, the last time a women-only relief shelter was opened, it got vandalized and people were writing very disparaging things about TERFs, and a dead rat was nailed to the door. Basically, cisgendered women aren't allowed to have safe spaces like those anymore because nowadays, that is considered bigoted. Do you see yet, my folks, how delusional people like Jim really are?
Or maybe just believe J.K. Rowling when she says it is dangerous to assert that any category of people deserves a blanket presumption of innocence. She meant trans people, of course. But if she's right, then hell, she gets no presumption either.
Jim, have you ever heard the phrase, the road to hell is paved with good intentions? Do you know how many groups of people have gotten into trouble just because they were presumed innocents of a crime? Now, naturally, no one should automatically be considered guilty by default either, but no group of people on this earth should just be presumed innocent as well. So Jim, what exactly was wrong with what J.K. Rowling said?
She is a TERF, loud and proud, Merry Turfmas, as she would say, and has said.
Oh dear.
Jim, she made a joke at the expense of crybabies just like you, and on top of that, she has done a lot more for society than you ever will. Jim, if you're trying to make her look like a bad person, then I'm sorry, but you have completely and utterly failed at doing that.
I've been out as a trans femme now for over 2 years. With my coming out, much about the world around me has changed, be it through my new perspective or the difference in treatment I receive. There's a lot of good. I'm complimented by sweet old ladies who like my boots, I'm hit on by lesbians in Leeds, people in general say nice things about me and I feel more comfortable saying them back. Mostly, I'm more confident. I like who I am and how I look. Things that weren't true.
You know what, Jim? To each his own. If this path you're on now is what truly makes you happy, then I'm happy for you. I applaud you, I congratulate you, and I mean that with everything that I've got to give. Having said that, and I'm now speaking realistically as someone who dropped out of watching your videos quite a while ago, you certainly don't seem happier now, quite the opposite. You seem to be a lot angrier with each video that you put out. You come off as far more unhinged than any point before this one. You genuinely seem to be upset at the loss of so many of your subscribers, and to top it all off, you don't seem motivated to make YouTube content anymore. Of course, Jim, you could always become a pro wrestler to make your living, and considering that your Patreon income has dropped by around $5,000 since the good old days, I think that would be a wise move on your part. What did it for me, what pushed me to abandon the Jim Sterling ship, was how he eventually started going way too deep into political territory, like with this video. But you all should see now why I try to avoid talking about politics. Look at what happened to Jim's channel. He went too political, and then his channel started to sink faster than the RMS Lusitania. Anyways, back to you, Jim.
People really don't care if I'm trans or not. There are negatives. It's no secret what it did to my career.
You have done that yourself.
The way in which I'm criticised online changed. Suddenly I was diagnosed by commenters as mentally ill, my age comes up a lot now, and my writing is tone policed, accused of being rude and screeching where it wasn't before.
Well, yeah, Jim, I mean, look at how your approach to making content changed. It didn't get better, it got worse. Much, much worse. I already stated everything that's happened to Jim in the last clip and how his content has changed. My apologies for that. So we're just gonna move along to the next little bit of Jim's rant.
But most of all, the world has become scarier. Scarier because of the right-wingers calling us all groomers and engaging in violence against us. Scarier because of the GOP and Tories scapegoating us and legislating our rights away with increased ferocity. Scarier because of media outlets like the BBC engaging in transphobia as a matter of policy. Scarier because of the people JKR has emboldened with her support. The gender criticals who preach eugenics and partake in phrenology to call for our eradication. Scarier because culturally and legally and increasingly physically, we've been staring down the barrel of genocide for a long, long time.
The world has become scarier? How? Jim, you have a male's muscle mass, in addition to a male's skeletal frame, and weight is clearly on your side. So what is there to be scared of? If you honestly think that the world has become scarier for you because more people are disagreeing with you, then you're even more delusional than I thought, and I already knew you were pretty delusional. Tell me, Jim, how long ago has it been since Pride Month has been a thing? How long has it been since you couldn't turn a street corner in a big city without being unable to see a pride flag? Were you able to sit on your rump all the livelong day 30 years ago, eating pizza and donuts and complaining on a video sharing website about the dumbest stuff you could find on the internet? No, apparently people disagreeing with Jim's crew is what makes the current world scarier nowadays. No, Jim, the only barrel you've been staring down is the menu you roll up and pretend is a telescope at Pizza Hut and Krispy Kreme. The only thing you're a victim of are the voices in your head. The sheer audacity to say that trans people are staring down the barrel of genocide. They get disproportionate representation in the media to the point that we're now seeing trans kids in the media, and simply being critical of things like that are enough to get someone fired in the current day and age. Lunacy, I tell you.
If you're not trans, if you're not so aware of how there's a new attack on us and our rights multiple times a day, every day, you won't quite know how bad it is. It's horrific. It's exhausting. We're less than 2% of the population, but we're called an epidemic. We're demonized in the press with extremely disproportionate coverage, and wealthy, powerful people like JKR can't stop thinking about us.
Less than 2% of the population, yet the transgender movement is represented in Hogwarts Legacy. Funny how that turned out, eh? Also, everyone, I'm apparently having an aneurysm because I keep getting ahead of what Jim is saying in the video, and I'm responding to things he hasn't said yet, so I'm gonna try to slow it down. My apologies for that one.
Look, some people might be delighted to hear this from me, but I'm going to admit it plainly. I'm afraid. I'm really, really afraid. And every day, for months, I've seen a video game that directly benefits one of the largest sources of that fear promoted on the PlayStation Store and Xbox Live, hyped up by the gaming press and championed by a community with a long-running vein of transphobia running through it that goes back to the hateful protests against a bit-part trans NPC in Dragon Age Inquisition. While
I haven't played Dragon Age Inquisition, I can tell you that whenever someone brings up the gay characters or the trans characters in the game, they have always been pretty positive about it. I have yet to see anyone bad talk them, and I love how you just lump all gamers into the same exact category. Only Siths deal in absolutes, Jim.
Every day, a constant reminder that we as trans people have so few friends, so few allies. Every day, a reminder that the game industry and community are contemptuous.
Less than 2% of the population, and yet y'all can get someone fired for misgendering you, or even just being critical about gender identity. I fixed it for you, Jim.
You know, as much as y'all gamers TM have tried, you've not owned me by posting the glowing review scores for Hogwarts Legacy or boasting about its sales success.
Wrong, Jimbo. Those who have posted glowing review scores of this game and bragged about its success absolutely have owned you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have made this video.
That just proves what I knew. That people don't give a f***. That's not new information. It's not a surprise. It's half of the course. That's all.
Oh, I disagree big time, Jim, because of reasons that I have given you over the past half hour now. People have been fired for misgendering people or even being critical of gender identity. Apologies, folks. I know I'm sounding like a broken record with this video, but that's because Jim himself is a broken record.
Those of you actively trying to harass me over it aren't the actual offensive ones. No, the offense comes purely from the self-described allies who want to have it both ways, who want to play their wizard game and get really upset when criticized over it. Or the media outlets who justify their uncritical reviews by having the fucking nerve to compare our protests against them to Gamergate. Transphobes, you need to up your game, because none of you will ever be as insulting as a self-styled cis ally who wants trans people's permission to not take a stand.
Jesus H. Christ on the cross. Jim is more upset at the people who want him and others like him to feel included in the gaming industry rather than the actual transphobes. Jim is just proving that he's one of those people that you will just never, ever, ever be able to please, so you may as well stop trying to please him. Also, quite the gall he has to be telling people who want him to feel included that they need a trans person's permission to not take a stand. Jim, you're not entitled to anyone taking a stand. You are talking like an out-and-out narcissist at this point.
Oh, and I love how the same Gamers TM who spent nearly 10 years calling game reviewers corrupt suddenly started trusting and touting them when a game they rallied around got 8s and 9s. Some of them even tried to twist Gamergate's ethics in game journalism pretext to defend outlets like IGN from criticism. IGN!
That's because, for once, Jim, IGN actually got something right. Hogwarts Legacy is a good game. Or at least it is if you're a huge fan of Harry Potter and RPGs. Anyways, the next 3 minutes or so is Jim winding up a storm over game reviews, so we're going to skip past that because it literally adds nothing to the video, and I want to keep this video focused on the cringy rant that Jim has been doing throughout the rest of the video.
So yeah, to the born-again Potter fans who spammed me with screenshots of IGN's big ol' 9, I'm not sure what you'll proved other than your own hypocritical opportunism. You'll be back to calling game reviewers SJW soon enough, won't you? I know I'm not changing any minds here. The bigots and Potter fans and people who just want to enjoy a video game made their decision. The allies who want to separate art from artists or hate JKR but just always wanted to Skyrim or Hogwarts made their decision. And regardless of intent, all of you look exactly the same to J.K. Rowling.
Jim, do you really think that people bought this game because they agree with J.K. Rowling's views? No, they did not. They bought Hogwarts Legacy because Harry Potter is a very popular IP, and as for someone like me who grew up reading the Harry Potter books, I've always wanted to be a student at that school, to see myself as a student of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry and wonder which house I would be sorted into. Hogwarts Legacy lets me do that. Now, I don't agree with most of J.K. Rowling's views myself. Hell, I don't even know most of them. But, guess what? I don't agree with most of yours either, Jim. In fact, I find your views on things to be far more harmful than I do J.K. Rowling's.
See, while people have tried to justify Hogwarts Legacy by saying JKR had no direct involvement, that doesn't change the fact she makes direct money from sales. More importantly, it doesn't change the truly insidious aspect of Harry Potter's continued success. JKR takes it as explicit endorsement of her views. She thinks the success of Harry Potter means people agree with her, and she's said so before.
That article that Jim linked says that 90% of the letters that J.K. Rowling receives from fans agree with her, but not 90% of the fan base of Harry Potter as a whole agree with her. Jim, you really need to learn to read articles all the way through instead of just posting their headlines in your videos and acting like that sums up the entirety of the whole article.
There is no difference in hers or any other TERF's mind between the people who bought Hogwarts because they wanted a fun wizard game and the people spite buying it to demonstrate the powerlessness trans people already feel. Intent doesn't matter. You're all just supporters to her. You are all permission.
Jim, at this point, this is when you go out and you look for a therapist, because this isn't normal. It isn't normal nor healthy to feel powerless over people's purchasing decisions of a video game. Jim, your group needs to simply learn that not everything in life is in y'all's control, and y'all seriously need to get over it. I'm talking about the Hogwarts Legacy boycotters, by the way. The power crave that Jim has displayed all throughout this video is frightening, and that, folks, is putting it mildly.
This is why you aren't an ally if you buy Hogwarts Legacy. No, buying the game doesn't make you a transphobe, and I'm tired of hearing the self-martyring whinging about that. I'm not saying you're transphobic for buying Hogwarts Legacy. I'm saying you're not an ally.
Question, Jim. If we're not your allies, then what are we exactly? Your enemies? Your foes? What are the opposite of your allies? Because while you aren't saying that we're your enemies exactly, you are certainly implying that we are your enemies. I thought the transphobes were your enemies.
You handed that card in because you couldn't do the barest minimum. You couldn't make the simplest stand. It's not that hard to not buy a AAA video game. You chose a product over people.
And I'm gonna do it again, too. Every single time a choice like this comes up, I will always choose a product over other people. Unless, of course, it's people that I know, love, and care about in real life. But don't be going around and acting like you're innocent of this either, Jim. This is why I asked my audience to remember that clip from the start of the video, that screenshot that showed Jim drinking from a can of Monster Energy drink. Monster Energy has had a lawsuit filed from within the company by 6 women over sexual abuse. There's also every single cell phone purchase that you've ever made, Jim, that was made by slave labor over in China, and the exact same thing goes for your gaming consoles as well. So, Jim, do you consider the implications of every single purchase you make? No, you don't. So don't be coming up to me or anybody else whining that we chose a product over people. Got that? The day we do it to your group is the day your group gets to do it to ours. Sound fair? 'Cause I think that's very fair.
And in doing so, you helped J.K. Rowling say things like this when asked how it feels to have alienated so many queer fans.
I read my most recent royalty checks and find the pain goes away pretty quickly.
That's what you do. You empower a fascist-supporting transphobe.
Jim, she's basically saying, I'm rich as all get out, so you can keep crying about me all you like, but it changes nothing. Man, you really are going to twist everything this woman says in a way that just attempts to demonize her.
So enjoy! Not a single one of you are under any obligation to refuse this game. I'm not demanding it of you, and I'm not going to say you're an inherently bad person for it. But I do not trust you. I can't count on you. Can't think you have our backs. I can't feel safe with you.
Oh, here we go. Jim is now basically saying, it's either me or the video game, and that's something that he's going to continue to stick with for the rest of this video. However, I really feel that I must say that I find it humorous that Jim says that if you bought this game, you're not an ally, and he doesn't feel safe with you. Jim, have you seriously not figured out why you've lost so many subscribers over the years? This is another one of the reasons. If this is how insane your demands are now, then imagine how bad they're going to be just a few years from now. Jim, I'm serious at this point. This isn't a joke, and this isn't me trying to be mean or hateful or whatever, but you seriously need therapy. That isn't normal to have someone's purchase of a video game be a make or break deal for their relationship with you.
And sorry, but you don't get to feel hurt by that. You get to enjoy your media product. I get to remember every digital storefront that took a Hogwarts sponsorship, every games journalist that promoted it, every platform and company that embraced it. And I get to remember that when Pride Month rolls around and the performative ally begins, your rainbow logos won't count for
Jim, it seriously took Hogwarts Legacy and the boycott surrounding it for you to figure that out? Dude, I hate to be the one to break it to you, but they never meant anything in the first place. Pride Month has become similar to Valentine's Day in that it doesn't really mean anything and is now nothing more than a marketing scheme companies do in an attempt to try and make more money. All that matters to any company out there is how much money can they make. And they definitely see Pride Month as an attempt to make money, so they plaster all the pride flags all over the shop to try and get as much money as possible.
It hardly needs to be said, but any of you who claimed you bought it to support the developers can especially get in the bin. Oh, they worked hard and should be supported. That's probably the dumbest attempt to lionize consumerism I've ever seen. I've seen this excuse so much, and I'm like, how dare you? How dare you lie to me so f***ing brazenly? You don't buy games just to support developers, you buy them because you want to play them. Tell me, do you buy literally every single game that's ever made and released? If you're motivated purely by dev support, that's what you do, right? Every game is developed by game developers, so why aren't you buying every game? Every single one? Get the f*** out of here with that blatant bullshit. Of course it's bollocks from a results standpoint too. The devs got paid already. They get paid for their work up front. Unlike JKR, they don't get royalty checks. They're not the ones supported by your purchase. She is. Warner Brothers is. Those are the beneficiaries. As we've discussed on this show before, game studios mostly live or die regardless of the success of one game, and thanks to the way public companies work, they're sometimes hurt by it, as layoffs often follow an influx of revenue to maintain the illusion of financial growth. Corporations don't operate based on customer support. If they did, we'd get more single-player games and fewer ones based around financially exploiting a minority of whale players.
Jim, what are you talking about here exactly? Supporting the game ensures that a sequel gets made, and while you are correct that J.K. Rowling gets royalty checks, that in turn ensures that the people who work on the game have full-time jobs that can support their families. Now, I do agree that it's a really weak excuse to buy the game, but are you seriously wondering why we don't buy every single game to support every single game developer out there? Jim, most of us live in the plane of existence called reality, and money is tight for all of us right now. So why can't we be selective about what video games we purchase? Regardless, this can be turned on you. Do you know how many game development studios out there share similar beliefs with J.K. Rowling? Just like how it would be physically impossible for us to purchase every single video game out there, why aren't you boycotting every single game? It's because it's physically impossible for you to do. Why is Hogwarts Legacy the one game that your group chose to boycott when so many other game developers out there share J.K. Rowling's beliefs, Jim?
You're not supporting the devs that tossed in a token trans character called Sir Owen Orion, explicitly to try and steer us all away from the subject of J.K. Rowling.
So let me see if I've got this right, Jim. The dev team put a trans character in Hogwarts Legacy as a way of apologizing for something they literally never did, and yet you're still treating it like it's a slap in the face. You see what I mean, folks? People like Jim just can't be pleased, so stop trying to please them. Live your best life and don't let them get to you. Jim's group is just like those bullies we all had to deal with when we were in school. Everything has to be their way or the highway, and my suggestion, everyone, is don't give them their way. They'll complain even more if they do get their way, for no other reason than they just cannot be pleased.
Support wasn't even your intent. That's a retroactive justification for something you were always going to do. And honestly, any of you who've come at me in the past few months with that excuse or any other excuse that attempts to paint your purchase of a video game in a noble light. You're not noble. You're not a hero. Play the game if you must, but don't you dare tell me you did it for any reason other than self-service.
We weren't planning on doing that, Jim. We just want to play a wizard game. Literally, none of us ever expected that people like you would ever come along and bite our heads off for simply buying the wizard game. We were minding our own business, and the instant this game got closer and closer to release, y'all began saying, "Don't buy this game, otherwise you're a transphobe." Again, Jim, you and your group, the Hogwarts Legacy boycotters, y'all need therapy, friends. Go get it.
Don't you ever look to me for validation, expect me to assuage your guilt, toss hypothetical scenarios at me that you think allow you to have it both ways. Just play your f***ing wizard game. How you feel about that is not my problem. You clearly decided how we feel isn't yours. Cis feelings aren't our responsibility.
Well, Jim, I can turn that line of reasoning, if you want to call it that, right back around on you, buddy. If cis people's feelings aren't your responsibility, then why are trans people's feelings ours? And I hate to be the one to tell you this, Jim, but they're right. No one on this green earth is responsible for how you feel or anyone else feels at any given time. Only you are responsible for that. But just listen to how narcissistic Jim sounded there. Don't you worry, Jim, old buddy, old pal. I will never in my life look to you for validation, or anyone else on the internet or elsewhere for validation, because I get that from my family members, my friends, and my loved ones. Do you get validation from your friends, family members, and loved ones, Jim?
It's so telling that the only real coverage of alleged harassment in games media this week has been about cis streamers getting upset at some mild pushback.
Mild pushback? No, Jim. Bullying people for buying, playing, and streaming a freaking wizard game is not mild pushback. It's targeted harassment and, as I said just a few seconds ago, bullying. Congrats, Jim. Your group are the bad guys in this situation, not us. Also, I find it infuriating how Jim shows complete disregard for cisgendered people, like they're a lesser subject to talk about. You know, Jim, cis people have feelings too, but they aren't ruled by their emotions. You should try it sometime. I highly recommend it.
It's a really old play. Whenever trans people advocate for themselves, we're painted as unreasonable bullies. Unsurprisingly, I've been asked to answer for the alleged harassment because minorities are always expected to take responsibility for each other. You know what? I'll answer it when I can go a day online without someone saying something truly vile about me, when I can stream without harassment myself, when I can post a selfie without being called a man or getting some other derogatory comment, when what trans people go through gets as much attention in the press, and when I feel people give as much of a about all of us as one cis person. If all that happens, I'll prostrate myself before you on behalf of all transes everywhere.
Jim, every single one of those demands are absolutely insane. They will never be met unless you monitor and police all forms of speech. And not only would that be physically impossible, it would also be absolutely immoral as well, at least in my opinion. The one demand you made that's already met is all the media focus on trans issues to an insane degree. It's the hot topic of every single day, of every single week, every single month, every single year. The media focuses on trans issues. And don't forget that Maya Forstater and others have been fired for not going along with what your group wants, Jim.
Until then, this'll do.
Checked out the big one that they're hailing as like the innocent streamer who got harassed off of the live stream. And what I have learned is that y'all genuinely think that accountability and basic criticism is the same thing as harassment and discrimination.
Okay, so I actually have to skip this part because 1, the girl in the TikTok video only talks about one of the 3 streamers that got harassed on a stream, and 2, she doesn't provide the full context. But I will tell that girl that what you think you're doing is not holding people accountable and giving basic criticism. It is, say it with me now, it's targeted harassment and bullying. There is a difference there, and I know for a fact that people like that Macy Linney, or whatever that TikTok bitch's name is, don't understand that. But it's true. Also, she says that what the Hogwarts Legacy boycotters are doing is basic criticism and holding people accountable are different, except when someone does it to her group, or the Hogwarts Legacy boycotters. Then, all of a sudden, notice that the tables are turned and the script flips and it becomes the exact same thing when it's done to them all of a sudden. Oh, where did we go so wrong in this life, folks? I genuinely want to know the answer to that one.
Cots don't work. I said that about, 10 years ago, and boy, people love blinging that one at me lately. I think there's still some truth to that, though looking back, it really is just what people are using it for. Permission to not take a stand. Kinda like how people have appropriated no ethical consumption under capitalism. Regardless, I know that in this case a boycott would never have worked. It's Harry Potter, and people don't care enough about trans people to pay JKR's crusade much attention.
So then you admit that your boycott was pointless, especially whenever big name big shots like you get involved, Jim. It doesn't matter that you didn't buy the game, Jim. It didn't matter that you took a stand. You talking about the game, period, is just as good anyways, especially with your reach as much as it's declined over the years. You talking about the game cause the Streisand effect to kick into high gear and increase Hogwarts Legacy's perception in the general public's eyes. Also, stop demanding that people take a side, or make a stand, or whatever. You are acting like a child, and you're literally throwing a temper tantrum. Or should that be a hissy fit? Regardless, you are not entitled to people taking a stand, so stop saying, "You didn't take a stand." You're a grown-ass adult, Jim. You are 40 years old. You're a decade older than me. So start acting like it, dude.
A boycott is not what I wanted nor expected. What most of us wanted was to simply point out why supporting a Hogwarts Legacy is harmful, to at least get good people to think about the implications, to be heard on this, and to find out who our allies really were. We certainly found out about that last one. We don't have many, and we're sadly not shocked. For me, it's not about stopping you buying Hogwarts, but to get you to accept the accountability of it. I know many of you want to consume guilt-free, but I'm not the girl who's going to condone that. It's really quite simple. If you buy it, you're not a trans ally. Yes, it's that stark an either-or choice, and this is coming from someone who rejects the binary whenever possible. You might not be against us, but you're either with us, or you aren't. Have fun Skyrimming a Hogwarts, and Merry Turfmas.
That is literally not at all what you displayed throughout this video, Jim. So to recap this entire video, since we're already over an hour in, at the start of the video, Jim said that J.K. Rowling is a transphobe, despite not even showing the worst of whatever it was she said that was claimed to be transphobic. Then he starts talking about all the other people J.K. Rowling follows and retweets, brought up stuff that shouldn't have even been in the video to begin with, finally talked about the game about 3 centuries into the video, then towards the end, said a whole tirade that could basically be summed up with the ultimatum of, it's either me or the video game. You see what I meant earlier in the video, folks, where I said that Jim comes off as angrier and more unhinged in his videos nowadays compared to what he used to be? Oh, this video was exhausting to make, and I have to go to Columbus in about 3 hours. And with that, we are finally done with this god-awful video. This is the longest video I've ever had to make on this channel in this style, folks, and I seriously doubt that monetization and ads will be a thing with it. So please, and forgive me for doing this again, but please consider subscribing to my channel, becoming a member, giving this video a like, leaving a comment with your thoughts on the whole situation, and with that, I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye for now.